right, welcome everybody to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is Monday, November 25th, 2024. We got a great show for you tonight. Before we bring our guest on, let's get our co-host in here, Gary Kendrick and his sidekick.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing, Gary?
Time to get squatchy.
Yeah, it's time to get squatchy.
That's right.
Pretty good, Bill. How are you doing?
Get squatchy. I'm doing just fine. I understand you're still out on your trip.
Yeah, we're up in Gatlinburg, Tennessee right now. We'll be up here through Thanksgiving. Having a good time so far.
Nice. Nice. Well, I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get our guest in here tonight. Long time no see, Todd. How are you doing?
Hey, Billy. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been quite. I think the last time we saw each other was at Salt Fork, Ohio.
Wow, that's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the Creature Weekends, I believe.
Yeah,
been a while.
Been a while. Yeah, it's you haven't changed a bit.
Yeah, I know. Thanks. You neither. Still look like you're 20 years young.
Yeah, in dog years.
All right. Well, we'll get right to it. I know Gary's itching to start asking you some interview questions, so he's got the smile on, so I know he's ready.
Hey, Todd. My name's Gary Kendrick. I'm glad to meet you. Tonight we have Todd Neiss. He's a U.S. Army vet. He was a combat engineer. He's been Sasquatch researching for over 30 years. You were a lab tech for about 5 years. You were also the vice president of a shipping company for a while. First question I would like to get into is tell us where you were at April 3rd, 1993, and what happened.
Well, April 3rd, 1993. Let me think. Oh, yeah. That was the day I was baptized into Bigfooting. I should preface by saying that I grew up in the Pacific Northwest all my life. Spent more than 60 years, actually, in the great state of Oregon and around the area. Hunted, fish, hike, mountain climb, did a lot of outdoor stuff, but never once did the thought of Bigfoot existing cross my mind. I mean, you can't help but hear about it when you live out in what apparently is ground zero for these things. But I just put it in the same basket as urban legend or a good campfire tale to spook kids, and that all changed for me on that day. We, I don't know if you mentioned, I was a combat engineer, which, if your listeners aren't aware, combat engineers employ a lot of high explosives in the work that we do, whether it's clearing a path through a minefield or blowing up a bridge or blowing up a road or anyway, it kind of takes the fun out of the 4th of July. But it was that particular day, we had 3 gravel quarries that were situated in the Oregon Coast Range near the town of Seaside. We're probably about a good 8-9 miles out of Seaside, but on some private timberland that we had special permission to access to practice our trade. And these 3 gravel quarries each had their own scenario. The first one was cutting steel I-beams with C4 plastic explosive. That was to simulate dropping a bridge, for instance. The second one, like I mentioned before, was clearing a path through a minefield, in this case with practice mines, of course, but the real explosives when it came to clearing them. The third and final site was a cratering charge, and again, that's where we would blow up a road, denying the enemy the usage of that particular route. So in that particular case, I think we were using about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we had been soaking in diesel fuel for several hours, and got that in the ground and lit the fuses, got in our vehicles. We had 5 vehicles in all, 2 Humvees, Jeeps in front, 2 in back, and then in the middle there was a large troop transport covered 2.5 ton, or deuce and a half, as you're probably familiar calling them.
Yes, sir.
And so I was in the second vehicle, and I happened to be a passenger sitting behind the driver. So we had a driver and an alternate driver up front, but not having to watch this winding logging road. I had the privilege of being able to look around the countryside. It was actually a very nice day for April in the Coast Range. Blue sky, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, bright blue sky. I had the window down, and this was an area, a hunting unit that I had hunted quite a bit, both deer and elk. So it was just natural for me to look around about the countryside looking for any wildlife. And we rounded this kind of a broad sweeping right turn, and the second blast site came into sight, and well, I got a little more than I asked for. As we rounded this corner, that second blast site, the one we had detonated the mine clearing charges hour or so earlier, came into view. So I had a direct line of sight of that gravel quarry, and standing out in the middle of the quarry were these 3 dark figures. And my first instinct was to, ask myself, what the hell are these people doing there? Because as you can imagine, when we're doing such a dangerous mission like that, everybody's got to be accounted for. It's 100% integrity. Everybody's got to be within eyesight. We don't send people out 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. And in this case, here's 3 very distinct dark individuals. I really hardly got the thought out of my mind about what the hell are those people doing there when I realized these weren't people at all. And by that, I mean, well, a number of things. Obviously, the size was off. They were very large individuals. Again, 3 of them facing our convoy across this ravine, obviously watching us as we descended away from this impending explosive we've got kicking off behind us. And just by description, the one in the middle was I estimate between 8 or 9 feet, taller than a about, if you can imagine a piece of plywood, almost as wide as a piece of plywood and slightly taller.
Wow.
The 2 on either side that flanked it on its left and right were, they came up to the shoulders of that larger one, but they were still easily 7 feet tall themselves. But the profile they showed was different than a human. For instance, the arms were extremely long. They went well down to their knees at least, and even the legs were too long in proportion to a human torso, if you will. But they were shaped like bodybuilders, all 3 of them. Not a stitch of clothes on them. Like I say, just covered in dark hair. But broad shoulders, a real barrel-shaped chest, which tapered down to a slightly narrower waistline. But it was what they were doing, and by that, I mean the one in the middle, that biggest one, stood there like a statue. But the 2 that flanked it to its left and right were exhibiting this swaying movement, if you will. They were rocking side to side, left to right, shifting weight from one foot to the other, and in the process, these long pendulous arms were swinging back and forth down at their knees. And they did that the entire the entire time I watched him, and by time I'm not talking 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I watched him nearly a half a minute. I watched him. I estimated about 25 seconds. So it's a pretty long view. Although 25 seconds doesn't sound like much, stare at your watch for 25 seconds and imagine seeing what I was seeing at the time. I was just in shock. I didn't know how to deal with it. I just was transfixed on what I was looking at until, like I say, 25 seconds transpired. The Humvee took a turn and I lost sight of them, and I just kind of slumped back in my seat. And as you can imagine, my head was just swimming with a million questions, none of which I had answers for. And it wasn't long before we reached the safety staging area where we would be, safe from any debris from the explosion, wait for the explosion, go back and check our work with standard SOP, But when we got down to that staging area, I jumped out of my Humvee and ran back the direction we came from because I was really hoping to get another view of them. I went as far as I dared because, again, 100% integrity. Everybody has to be in eyesight, and I just quickly got as far as I could without getting in trouble. And unfortunately, I didn't have a direct line of sight due to this embankment that was blocking my view, which killed me because I knew if I just went another 50 yards, I'd be able to see him again. But in hindsight, it probably would have been worth getting in trouble over, but can't turn back the clock. But anyway, it was while I was standing there looking off in the distance that I heard somebody yell my name, and I looked off to my right and was being approached by Sergeant Martin, who kind of blurted out. He goes, "So what are you looking at?" And I dropped my hands to my side. And I said, "Oh, nothing." And he continued coming up my way. He was smoking on a cigarette, I recall, and he got right up to where I was standing and looked me right in the eyes, and he goes, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." And I said, "I don't know, Jeff. What did you see?" And he kind of looked to the left and right, made sure nobody else was within earshot, and he looked back at me and said, "I saw 3 big hair-covered, I don't know, Bigfoot, I guess." And of course, at that, I went, "Yeah, I saw him too, brother." And being in a National Guard as a traditional guardsman, as you know, we at that time we trained once a month. So our next drill would have been early May of '93. And it was at that drill we had 2 more soldiers come up independently, both claiming that they also had seen what Jeff and I had seen a month earlier. Same description, same everything, same number of creatures. And so, in that sense, it's a fairly unusual sighting. I would come to find out, just not that any of them aren't, but I mean, in this case, multiple creatures are fairly rare. It's usually a single individual that's seen, and then multiple eyewitnesses. And then on top of that, the nature of our business out there. I mean, we were literally blowing up their home. We were detonating some very large explosives, creating miniature earthquakes and sending up mushroom clouds about 2,000 feet in the air. So they came out to, best of my recollection, they probably came out to investigate what the hell was going on and figure out where we were and what we're up to. Anyway, so that's how I got involved, and I've been researching now, going on about a little over 31 years now. So it's been an incredible journey. I can't unsee what I saw. Not that I would want to. I consider it kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it's a blessing in that the odds of being able to see something like that are very, lottery type odds, but it's kind of a curse because I don't know about you, but I won't stop looking for them and trying to understand them and what they're all about and how they can exist in this modern world the way they do. And it's like I say, it's been an amazing journey, and I don't regret a bit.
Yep.
Excellent.
It's that Bigfoot bug, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the studio audience, I want to hop in there with a few things. Todd was talking about ammonia nitrate and diesel fuel soaking. I'm from cold country in Southwest Virginia. Ammo used on the strip jobs and things like that, and that stuff ain't no joke. That is serious explosives.
Well, now you all call it Prel, I believe.
Info.
Yeah, you mix the two and use it to in the mining business. I know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ammonia nitrate and fuel oil. That's what it stands for. ANFO. ANFO. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is a really good thing that you mentioned it, and I've researched you, and I've watched several of your other podcasts that you've done, and some places that you spoke at and things like that. But you talk about the two smaller creatures swaying back and forth and their arms moving. In primates, especially chimpanzees, the swaying. If you go to zoos and things like that, you'll see a lot of the primates, they swing back and forth. And that's actually a stress response from them being caged in. But do you think that the swaying was a stress response from the explosions that had already occurred?
I do. And the reason for that, I was fortunate to meet a number of people along this 30-year journey, and one of them was a primatologist by the name of Dr. Henner Fehrenbach. He lived in Oregon, worked at the Northwest Regional Primate Center in Beaverton, Oregon, and I had a chance to talk with him about what happened, and his immediate response is very much like what you said. He said that is an instinctive behavior when they are either agitated or stressed, anxious, if you will, and certainly what we were doing would put them in that state of mind. But yeah, that's quite common. Like you say, you'll see it in zoos sometimes, but that is a very natural reflex for them.
Yeah.
I know you talked about the primatologists that you worked with, and one of the things that you do, and I'm going to try not to screw this up, is the American Primate Conservancy. Is that correct?
Yes, the American Primate Conservancy is a nonprofit organization which I founded in 2015. Key word in that is the conservancy piece, because a long time ago when this first happened to me, I've kind of considered the odds. We could have been driving by 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later. They wouldn't have been there. I could have been preoccupied, looking a different direction. But everything came together at that moment for that to happen. And so I've always looked for a purpose in why me, why them. And I've done a bit of soul searching, and what I've come up with is that I have a genuine concern that these animals, this species, I should say, could be endangered or threatened, and I say that because of the rarity of the sightings and really the lack of data that we don't have on them. a lot of people will say, "Oh, leave them alone; they'll be fine. They've been doing great without us for millions of years." And well, that's a romantic notion, but it's based on nothing. We don't have the data to know that for certain. You can't tell me how many there are today. You certainly can't even begin to tell me how many there were 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And, what their habitat, range, resources, gestation period, all the things that you would commonly attribute to any rare or exotic species. We could be talking about a frog or a lizard or a butterfly. Any scientist would want to know those things, and yet we don't have that information. And so I put together the Conservancy in an effort to get more information and to ultimately get them recognized scientifically. And it's only through that recognition that we can afford to get them some protection. Again, it's open season right now, if you think about it, because as long as mainstream science is going to stick their head in the sand and pretend these things don't exist, nobody's going to bother to put any sort of laws or acts in place to protect them. And so that's what I've been working for, is to get that recognition. It's a very difficult process, but I've got some ideas about how to do that, and we're moving along with it.
And I know in on your page, the American Primate Conservancy, you talk about that you believe in the Jane Goodall and the Diane Fossey technique of gathering credible evidence of existence. How do you think that would play out?
Well, I mean, if you look at what Godakis did with the orangs and what Fossey did with the gorillas and Goodall does with the chimpanzees, it takes literally putting yourself in their environment and remaining in that environment to such a degree that you become part of that environment. You become a natural neighbor, if you will. And I think through that process is how they got as close to these things as they can. And if you look on the website, my long-term goal is to establish a long-term, at least 60, 90 days in the field base camp where some teams you might have to rotate a team out here and there, but we could have a persistent station there in an area that we know there's some fairly recent activity, and just try to acclimatize them to our presence to the point where their curiosity gets the best of them and they come to get to know their neighbors. It's happened before, and I think it can happen again. And frankly, I think these things are much closer to us species-wise than a lot of people think. Certainly more closer than any gorilla, or orangutan, or chimpanzee. I dare say I believe they are of the human genus. So I've got my reasons to believe in that, and it's really through a process of elimination as you go through how taxonomy works and how animals are classified.
We've got a couple questions from the chat here. I'm going to go ahead and throw them up real quick. We have Jay wants to know where the explosions preset by hand or fired by a large gun.
Oh, these are all hand-set explosives, and you in the combat engineer world, there's a real science to explosive, as I'm sure you're aware. Certain techniques that have to be done in the field. So yeah, all of this stuff was done by hand, placing charges next to inert anti-tank mines. There's a special way to place plastic explosives in order to get a shearing action on steel to cut I-beams with. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. You just can't fire it from any gun. You got to actually be out in the field.
Yeah.
And just from my own personal experience being in the military, once you do set a charge, it's checked by about 30 people after that to make sure you didn't screw it up.
Well, that depends if you pulled the music already.
Thomas had a question here. Todd said, did all three of the figures appear to have the same color, or were there any differences?
No, they appeared to be all the same shade of either extremely dark brown, like this bear skin rug behind me, or black. It was very, very distinctly dark. And the interesting thing too is that I would say if they were standing with the forest backdrop behind them, I would probably not have seen them at all. But the fact was they were standing in this quarry made up of basalt rock, which is it's a very light kind of a concrete gray. So imagine a sunny day, well lit, very dark figures with contrasted against a very light gray background. So I mean, they really stood out. They would be hard to miss in that.
I know we got one more here from Kelly. Kelly wants to know, were the faces visible, and if so, were they more ape-looking or human-looking? Which I know it was over 100 yards, so it's going to be a little bit hard to tell.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kelly, that's a good question. The distance I was at, I could not make out either facial features or genitalia. I could just tell you they were very large individuals, and it would be very easy to describe them as being male. I would think certainly the one in the middle there was probably an alpha male. But no, as far as facial features, I was not close enough, unfortunately, to see that.
Okay. Well, it's that time, Todd. It's time to play the Todd Neiss theme song set to some country music.
I can't wait.
Here we go. Here's another country hit, folks.
Todd Neiss, soldier who marched through fighting lands, with medals and memories, came back but not settled hands. He heard the whispers of mysteries untold. In the Ozarks of Arkansas, his search was bold. He traded his rifle for a camera and a map, checking through the woods onto nature's lap. In the quiet of the forest with the stars up high, Todd follows trails where the shadows lie. Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot, where do you roam? Among the pines and valleys far from home. Todd's out there searching under the moon's bright light, haunted by the secrets that hide from sight. By the campfire's glow, he tells tales so wild, of nights in the silence and the forest child. Encounters etched in folklore, he's on the quest. With every step, his heart beats in his chest. Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot, where do you roam? Among the pines and valleys far from home. Todd's out there searching under the moon's bright light, haunted by the secrets that hide from sight. In the heart of the Ozarks, the wind whispers low, through the cedars and the willows, For in the heart of the wilderness, truths never hide. Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot, where do you roam? Among the pines and valleys far from home. Thoughts out there searching under the moon's bright light, haunted by the secrets that hide from sight. Haunted by the secrets that hide from sight. In the heart of the Ozarks, the wind whispers low. Through the cedars and the willows, the stories grow. Todd keeps on the chase, with hope in his stride. For in the heart of the wilderness, truths never hide.
There's your theme song, Todd.
Well,
That's a good one.
I didn't know you could sing, Billy, but you're
Yeah. And
you're proper.
pretty good.
Being on,
You put a microphone in front of me. I can do wonders.
Well, that's nice. Thank you. I did.
Jay
Not,
Fitz is the question. Jay says, so I would surmise that they were in the open to be away from the blast and also close to the road, probably observing the explosion being set, aka showing reasoning, which kind of leads me into my next question, which is, tell us about your quote of primal intelligent quotient.
yeah. So a lot of people have asked me about their intelligence. You know what my opinion is of it, and I thought about it, and it really comes down to how you categorize intelligence, because humans, Homo sapiens, I should say, we measure it in IQ or intelligence quotient, but in reality, IQ in that regard would be academic, if you will. So I call that AIQ, or academic intelligence quotient, and it changes with time. I mean, imagine what people's IQ might have been 200 or 300 years ago. So I juxtapose that against what I call PIQ, or primal intelligence quotient, because let's face it, we all at one time, that being Homo sapiens, we had that primal intelligence, and just because of our ability to reason and invent, and with the advent of technology, we've traded that primal intelligence in exchange for convenience through technology. And every day, as we get more quote unquote advanced technologically, we really get dumbed down in terms of that primal intelligence. Whereas the Bigfoot species is really the ultimate survivor, if you think about it, because all it would take with all of our wonderful technology is for one EMP device to be detonated above the say the United States, and all of our electricity, our entire electrical grid goes down. I would give us, most people, about 3 to 5 months to survive. A few people might make it a year or more, but you have no refrigeration, no heating, no cooling, no fuel, no transportation. Everything we depend on would be gone. And yet the Bigfoot species would be completely unaffected. It'd be like just another day to them. And meanwhile, this technology, this academic intelligence, literally could be our undoing. So who is really more intelligent? who's going to survive? Because that takes intelligence. And getting back to what your listener just mentioned, it makes a very good point, because I've thought about that as well. You know, when it comes to these explosions we were setting off, and again, small earthquake, temporary as it was, shock waves and mushroom cloud. You would think any animal, any species out there in that area, be deer, elk, bear, cougar, what have you, is going to go in the opposite direction and as far away from that event as possible.
Oh yeah.
And yet, you look at what they did, and within an hour's time, they were able to steel themselves, overcome any fear that most animals would have, out of what? Curiosity. What is curiosity? They wanted to find out what's going on. It's curiosity is the need to know, or knowledge. They needed to figure out what was going on, and they were willing to risk. They were willing to take certain risks that most animals wouldn't, for the need to know. And so that tells me right then and there that they are intelligent. And so that's what got me into looking into the different types of intelligence and how we actually measure intelligence. And quite frankly, they, in many ways, they are smarter than we are.
Oh yeah, quite intelligent. That's a giveaway. My next question is going to seem a little odd. Can you tell us about Toddzilla?
Godzilla. I'm not sure we got that. That was my nickname when I was in the Army. I imagine it probably stemmed from my coming out, if you will, with regards to my sighting. But yeah, that was just a nickname that stuck on me, and I don't know. It's kind of hard to shake, but I think it's kind of cute. Where did you find that?
I do a lot of
them
research.
bones.
You do some pretty good sleuthing to find that. Yeah.
My
So I
next
should
question.
really quick, if you don't mind, give myself a shameless plug, but I am in the process of finally writing a book. It's something that's long overdue, but you know, it's something I've always wanted to do, and frankly, it's been in my head for a long time. But the issue I've found, and the one thing that's kept me from doing it, is that this has been a 30-plus year journey, and it's a never-ending story, right? I mean, I have learned things in just the last year, some very amazing things, some of the most really tremendous concepts, ideas, and theories in just the last really 7 or 8 months that I plan to share in my book that I didn't know a year ago. And it's been very difficult for me to just, you know, where do you draw a line and say, okay, here's 30 years of Bigfooting, and you know, I have to preface it by saying this is a snapshot of where I'm at today, and 6 months from now, I may be having to revise this whole thing because of new things I've found in my research. But anyway, I'm looking forward to the book coming out. My goal is to have it out by New Year's. So be looking for that. I've got a few other things on the burner. I've been working on a couple documentaries with various individuals. I've got some already done and a couple in process right now. I am planning to do an expedition up to Port Chatham up in Alaska this summer with a documentary team. I'm sure a lot of your listeners might know of that amazing story up there, where a bunch of Native Alaskans were driven away from a Port Chatham, which was a fully functioning fishery, including a cannery and processing area, due to some very violent encounters, allegedly with Bigfoot in that area. So that ought to be interesting. I plan to be speaking. Let's see, I'll be in Falk, Falk Monster Festival in late April, down in Falk, Arkansas, where Legend of Boggy Creek was filmed. If everything works out, I plan to be speaking in England in May. Then in June, I've got Beachfoot, my annual gathering that will be my 18th Beachfoot gathering. Then I'll be speaking in July at the Sasquatch Superfests. And that then we'll just be heading straight to Alaska after that. So I got a few things cooking right now.
Nice.
Yeah, you got a full book right there.
Yeah.
Todd,
Keeps me up.
tell us a little bit about Operation Sea Monkey, where you worked with Ron Moorhead, Thomas Steinberg, and Tom Seward.
Yeah, Operation Sea Monkey. Again, I've always tried to think outside the box. I mean, obviously nobody's got it right. We haven't got the definitive proof that we're all looking for, that irrefutable evidence. And so I'm always looking at a way to build a better mousetrap, if you were a big mousetrap. And one of the things that I had considered, and it's actually on my website, it's been there, it's AmericanPrimate.org. And that is to take a large vessel up to British Columbia and spend an entire season, summer season, 3 months, 90 days at least, and explore the coastline and the islands that exist between mainland British Columbia and the island, Vancouver Island. And in 2016, I brought this up with Tom Seward, who's from that area, and he insisted that the timing was right. This was, I want to say, Labor Day weekend when he came to visit me at the Chateau de Squatch, my home in Oregon. And I asked him why, and he said, well, the traditionally his tribes people, his First Nations tribe, Kiwak, would harvest clams right around the end of September, early October, because that's when clamming season begins, because the waters, ocean waters cool down to where the clams are edible. And at the same time, Bigfoot have been known to scavenge the beaches as well. And there was a number of different dozens of sightings over hundreds of years, actually. And so I had about 3 weeks to put together this expedition. It kind of came up fast on me. Now, like I said, my initial idea was to take a large vessel. In fact, I owned a 42-foot motor yacht that I actually lived on for several years. And it was large enough to do what I wanted to do, and it was considered a coastal cruiser, so I could take it from Portland on up into Canada. But he's like, no, now we got to go now. I said, I don't have a boat available. I certainly don't have enough time. He said, well, don't worry about the boat. You worry about putting together a team and raising some money, and let's get this done. And so I did my one and only GoFundMe project, and I was very blessed to have people donate up close to $7,000 in 3 weeks toward the project. And so we went up the last week of September 2016. We left out of Campbell River, British Columbia, on a 50-foot trawler. and spent a week up in what's known as the Broughton Archipelago, which is a chain of islands, close to 100 islands, really small islands that are situated between the mainland of British Columbia and Vancouver Island, the northern tip of Vancouver Island. And being that we only had a week to work, it's really what I would consider a expedition trial, if you will, to test out equipment, to see if we had the right environment, the right habitat, and try out some different tactics while we're up there. We anchored off of about 5 different islands and had 2 inflatable Zodiacs that we could launch from the mothership, if you will. The Clattawa was the name of the vessel, and we had, of course, game cameras, seismic ground sensors that I happen to own that measure vibration in the ground that would transmit that data out to the vessel. And then we would spend shifts every night watching the beaches with some very expensive infrared cameras. We obviously had interactions with a number of different animals up there, including black bear, grizzly bear, wolves, deer, you name it, everything but the Holy Grail. But it was a great way for us to test out our equipment, some of the tactics that we intend to do, hopefully, again, when I can round up the funding to do it on a long-term basis. So, but it was we had a dream team, really. It was not myself and Tom Seawood, but we had Ron Moorhead. I'm sure most of your listeners know who he is. Been a very good friend of mine for over 25 years. And then we had Thomas Steenberg, who I've known since 1996 when we shared the stage up at Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia, during the Sasquatch Symposium up there. Gunnar Monson from Sasquatch Coffee was with us. I know I'm leaving people out. I had 2 professional videographers that joined us to film things. Anyway, it was a very amazing adventure and I think a successful expedition.
My next question, it's another weird one, but I'll explain it as I go along. I ask your guest this: animal, mineral, or vegetable? Do you believe that Bigfoot is a natural occurring animal? Do you believe in the mineral part that Bigfoot might be interdimensional or extraterrestrial? Or vegetable, do you believe it might be supernatural, or do you believe it's a combination of all 3?
That's a great question. Actually, 3 great questions with one answer. Yeah. So I believe and always have been on the side of science and biology, and that we're dealing with a flesh and blood animal. Now, when you cross that Rubicon into supernatural or paranormal, you really have to look into the definition of those words, because what is supernatural and paranormal? If you look at the definition, they are just certain experiences that are beyond the knowledge or explanation of science today. Now, given that definition, there's a lot of things today that are very natural, that were supernatural, and so my hope is that we can make supernatural natural. We can make paranormal normal by bridging that gap between science and the paranormal. And I'll tell you how that started for me was I have a lot of friends that believe in that what a lot of people have facetiously called the woo, that being people that delve into that supernatural paranormal. And there are different degrees of it, let's be honest. But again, just by definition, there were certain things that I had placed into that paranormal file. And it wasn't because I didn't check into it to try to prove whether or not these things were possible. It's just that, my first go-to when somebody says that I've seen an animal that can shoot fire out its butt or whatever, I'm okay. All right. My first go-to is show me one other animal, one other incident that we know of where this happens. And if you can show me another animal that can do that, then we've got to start. But if you're just going to make something up that you can't show me any other example of it in nature, then have a nice day. And one of those things I had put in that category was this whole eye shine thing. I looked into it. Don't get me wrong. I knew. So here's the problem for me: is I've met so many people and made friends with a lot of people who have these views, and I don't want to just patronize them and say, "Oh, that's interesting." I want to try to make sense of it, and so I had just, in looking at eye shine, I could not find another animal that has that capability, especially a mammal. We look at naturally created light. You look into things like bioluminescence, for instance. A lot of different. I've actually seen photoplankton, for instance, in the ocean that glows when I've been scuba diving. Fireflies are another example of terrestrial animal that can process electrochemical reaction. But a mammal with light coming out of its eyes, I could not find anything to validate that. It wasn't until I was invited to the Omaha Indian Reservation 3 years ago that I had to eat a little bit of crow, I guess, because not only did I experience that eye shine effect, and I have to say, in conjunction with that, there was a lot of vocalizations that were going on. And this is between the hours of midnight and 3 in the morning, mind you, in the middle of nowhere, along the Missouri River banks in very heavy timber. And we're not just talking a single stationary set of eyes. We're talking as many as 2 or 3 at a time that moved independent of each other. You could see them blink. You could see their eyes move, their heads move, their bodies. They would move left, right, forward, backwards. They moved around. And I knew I wasn't getting punked at that point. But the vocalizations that accompanied it were just some of the most amazing things I ever witnessed. And so when I got on that plane after observing this for several nights, I'm like, okay, Todd, now I got to explain this. You've got to go home and explain this because you can't unsee it. You saw it, now explain it. And I went to great lengths to figure out how it happens, and I believe I have. And that led me down this rabbit hole of, okay, what other things have I put in that paranormal bucket that I might be able to explain scientifically? And this is some of the epiphanies that I've just mentioned earlier on when we first came on about some things that I've learned in the last 7 or 8 months that that will explain a number of different phenomena that people in the paranormal, supernatural category, I can explain scientifically how what they experienced is actually possible scientifically. So my issue is not with whether or not they actually experienced what they claim to have. It's more along the lines of their interpretation of how that happened and what it represents. So all I can tell you is it'll all be coming out in my book here shortly. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag just yet, but I'm really excited about it because I went down that rabbit hole, the more things I was able to figure out, and I'm like, wow. Yeah, so if you bridge that gap between the more, I suppose, serious biologic, scientific, citizen scientist group and those in the paranormal, supernatural side, then we can all do that kumbaya thing and just keep it along.
Well, Todd, that leads me into my next question because you brought this up about an expedition that you did on the Omaha Indian Reservation. I believe you were a tribal member named Barry Webster, and you talked about how Barry Webster could call up a Bigfoot, and you actually had one that sang to you.
Huh.
And I'm very fascinated by it because you said that it sang a song. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I really, when I went out there at their invitation, I wasn't really prepared to go out in the field. I didn't really know what they had in mind, but I've been communicating with these guys for almost 3 years by that time, and they told me their videos and much of it this eye glow stuff, and I didn't know what to make of it, but I figured I'll be your Huckleberry. I'll come out and check out what you got. And so I was there for a week, got to know them over the weekend, and then went out in the field. And we went out 5 nights in a row, Monday through Friday, before I had to catch a flight home that next Saturday. Where do I begin? Barry had told me that they had established a relationship over the years, and that he was able to call them in, or at least get them to show up on a fairly regular basis, which is something, this whole habituation thing, I could say that's kind of far-fetched, but then again, I'm the same guy that says Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey did it, so why not, right? But I don't know about you, but if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, Billy, you want to go see Bigfoot tonight? Come on, let's go." I might humor you. I might say, "Okay, what the hell? I got nothing going on." Yeah, okay, let's just do, just to put it. But because it just doesn't happen that way. You just, if I could take somebody out to see Bigfoot on demand, I'd be selling tickets and be a very rich man.
Boy, ain't that the
If that
truth?
same person came to you and said, "How'd you like to see Bigfoot 5 nights in a row?" I would slowly back away and, try to get them signed up. But I'll be damned if it didn't happen. I never thought I'd say this, but we did have encounters 5 nights in a row, and not in just one location, but 2 separate locations on the reservation, very remote. And you have to keep in mind, too, that this was right at the height of COVID, and the entire village, the main village there, was locked down. They were quarantined generally from 7 in the morning, and I think it was about 9 o'clock at night until 7 in the morning. Nobody could leave the village. Now, Barry was an exception because he happened to have a pretty good standing in the tribal council, and so he was able to make excuses for us to get outside. But 99% of the tribe was locked down, quarantined during those hours. So I only mention that because one of my first suspicion is whether or not I'm being hoaxed or punked or whatever you want to call it. But the fact that everybody, literally nobody was able to get out of that village, with this exception of Barry and myself and his brother. So and there were no other cars around. We pulled over on this small 2-lane road, turned off all the lights, and walked across this road that we really couldn't even see. I mean, other than feeling the pavement under our feet. I just followed Barry over to the side of the road, and he called out to them in his native language. He would yell, kind of went like this: "Oh ho, Colgate," which means "hello, friends," in Omaha language. And it took 20, 30 seconds, some maybe always less than a minute, and all of a sudden, I'm looking at 2 lights that appeared to be eyes at a distance of probably 140, 150 feet away. And I can't see my hand in front of my face. It's that dark. But yet I can see these what appear to be eyes. And as I said, at times we had 2, sometimes 3 individuals that moved independent of each other. But getting to your question about the song, it was that first night, that Monday night, we went out to this location, and we were there. He called out to them, and they seemed to have responded and showed up. And one of the first vocalizations I heard was quite distant. I would say it was beyond the individual that we were seeing, which I said maybe 140, 150 feet away. This was probably 100 yards away, where this sound was coming from out of the dark. But I heard this melody, for lack of a better word, that went on for 5 to 6 seconds in length, and it changed. There were a number of different notes in it. It changed in pitch, it changed in volume and rhythm. It had it all in like 6 seconds. But it was very distinct, and it sounded female to me just because of the high pitch. It was very, very loud, but it was not frightening in the least bit. I dare say it was beautiful, and it was welcoming. I mean, if I was to pick up any sort of vibe from it, that's what I felt was like. It was saying hello, or well, like I said, it went on for 5 or 6 seconds, and then it was quiet for about 10 to maybe 15 seconds. She did it again. And I'm telling you, it was identical to the first verse, if you will. This melody, she sounds off again, same notes, same pitch, tune, rhythm, all of it. And in the course of about a minute, she did this 4 times, and it was identical every single time. Now, that in and of itself tells me a lot, because we're not talking some arbitrary whoops or roars or howls or screams. We're talking something that is repetitive. And anytime you have something very distinct and repetitive like that, to me, that says there's a language or a message that's embedded in that it says a lot. And what they didn't know was that on the 3rd day, Wednesday, I was expecting to meet with them around 5 or 6 o'clock. And I had memorized the route to this particular location. And so I left a little early to get there. I drove out to that location because I wanted to see what it looked like in broad daylight. I couldn't see the head in front of my face, and I wanted to make sure that what the backdrop was. Is there a road back there? Are there street lights back there? Is there any like reflective glass or anything that I could attribute any of these lights to? Or and as it turned out, there wasn't. It was just a big hillside behind, almost like a theater backdrop of just a hill. So it kind of eliminated any other ulterior source of lights. And one thing I brought, this is kind of funny, the one thing I did bring with me was a tape recorder, a digital, you're probably familiar with the Tascam. It's like a Zoom recorder. So I decided while I was up there, figuring that if these things are active at night, surely they got to sleep sometime. So I felt fairly comfortable hiking up this little slope up to where I assumed that they were standing the 2 nights previously. And I got up there and I set this recorder between a couple of trees and turned it on and covered it up with some leaves. And this I can't make this up. As soon as I stood up after setting that tape recorder down, broad daylight now, coming from the same direction as 2 nights earlier, comes this melody. And I'm like in shock. I'm like, well, first of all, I thought at this point I was safe because they were probably sleeping. No. But what was cool was it was the same. I guarantee it was the same individual. And keep in mind, nobody knew I was out there. Nobody knew I was going there. And there were no other vehicles anywhere in sight the entire time I was out there. This thing sounded off with the same notes, the same tune, the same rhythm, everything, the same length, 5 to 6 seconds long. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I just got that on tape. So then I turn to leave. I'm like, thank you. That was nice. And I turn to leave and I get halfway to my vehicle and I hear what sounds like this. 6 rapid fire. You call them tree knocks. I don't care what you call them, but I've heard tree knocks, but not 6 rapid fire ones. And it was coming from the opposite direction. Well, at this point, I'm getting a little nervous. And so I'm like, hey, I'm leaving. Just let me get to my car and I'll be gone, But again, I'm thinking, this is amazing. I'm going to, once I got safely to the vehicle and took off, I'm thinking, when I come back and get that recorder, I've got gold on there. Well, when I did finally get back there to get the camera the next day, I discovered that, yeah, I turned it on, but having not used it for a while, I did not turn on the record part of it. So it's sitting there with the red power light still on, because these things will record for like 72 hours. I go to pick it up and I forgot, you push the same button. You push it once and the red light comes on, tells you the power's on. You got to push it a second time and then the light flashes and then you know it's recording. So I missed that amazing song and that knock, and I was just wanted to throw up. But that's my mea culpa. I screwed up. It happens. But regardless, that I've never heard anything in terms of Bigfoot vocalizations that ever approached what I would consider a melody until that night. And one night and then 3 days later during the daytime. And it was just absolutely amazing and beautiful to listen to. And I didn't feel threatened at all.
We've got one question here from Mick, who is our comic relief most of the time. Mick says, question for Todd. Could that have been chest beating rather than tree knocks?
You know, if I could compare it to anything, it sounded like if you had two people standing there with wooden baseball bats facing off and just go 1, 2, 3 and smack two wooden bats together as hard as you can and somehow pull it off 6 times within about 3 seconds. I don't know. I don't even know how you could do it with just one bat, hitting a tree or whatever. I didn't perceive it as being chest beating, but then again, I have seen chest beating gorillas, apes, if you will, on TV, and they could do it pretty rapid fire, and it can be pretty loud. But this was really a hard wood on wood kind of sound. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, Billy, I've still got like a page and a half, but we're already over time, so I'm going to be done here.
Well, it was good, Todd. Everybody enjoyed it.
Well, good. Well, it's just hard to, like I say, to put 30 years into 60 minutes. But
exactly.
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 And it is a quick 60 minutes, too, let me tell you.
Yes, it certainly is.
Well,
we appreciate it.
Through in there, but that was thank you. I really appreciate it. That was pretty cool.
We appreciate it, Todd. Can you hold on while we close the show out? Can you hold on a few minutes?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to say, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We went a little over time, but I don't think y'all minded because you were enjoying the story. So we want to thank each and every one of you. Come back next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll bring you another fine guest. But until then, you all have a nice rest of the week. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. I just want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there.